is CGTN, China Global Television Network.
Live from London, this is The World Today.
Hello, I'm Robin Dwyer. Welcome to the programme. Our top stories. Russia's defence minister seen for the first time since Saturday's failed mutiny. Whereabouts of Wagner chief Yevgeny Prigozhin, who tried to oust him, remain unknown. Russia's prime minister says the country must unite behind President Putin after what he called a challenge to its stability. New Zealand's Prime Minister calls for increased trade between the two countries as he begins his 5-day official visit to China. And Kyriakos Mitsotakis starts a second term as Greek Prime Minister after a resounding victory in the election rerun. Russia's defence ministry has released video it says shows Defence Minister Sergei Shoigu visiting a command centre in Ukraine. It's the first time the military chief has been seen since the failed Wagner rebellion over the weekend. Wagner chief Yevgeny Prigozhin, who's been highly critical of Shoigu and other military leaders for months, specifically called for Shoigu's removal when he launched his action on Friday. That action came to an abrupt halt on Saturday evening when Prigozhin announced he'd stopped his troops as they neared Moscow as part of a deal brokered by Belarusian President Alexander Lukashenko. Prigozhin hasn't been seen in public since Saturday. Leaders across Europe were monitoring events in Russia very closely over the weekend. In Brussels, where EU foreign ministers are meeting, it's top of the agenda for talks. Well, in a few moments, we'll be in Moscow for the latest with our correspondent Dasha Chernyshova. But first of all, let's head to Brussels and talk to our correspondent Mark Webster. So, Mark, a lot of strong reaction coming out of Europe. What's being said?
Well, interesting here, defence analysts in the West are pretty much united that the tone of what's being said is much stronger, particularly around the strength of the position of President Putin himself. Now, it was started in the United States, where the Secretary of State said he saw cracks in Mr. Putin's leadership. We had the Italian foreign minister who went on to say that the myth of Russian unity was dead because of the events of the weekend. Bear in mind, we don't actually know very much about the detail of what did happen, or why Mr. Prigozhin went into self-imposed exile in Belarus. However, the conclusion is that it has somehow fundamentally changed the game, that President Putin is no longer this invulnerable person in power that he was before whatever happened at the weekend. Now, other analysts, I should say, are cautioning. They're saying, look, President Putin has been in total control of Russia now for more than 20 years. He's shown himself incredibly adept at manipulating the situation, at keeping his enemies at bay. The difference is this time, it wasn't one of his enemies who seems to turn against him. It was a protege and friend, Mr. Prigozhin, who was behind the coup. Now, he is the one, if you remember, who was known as Putin's chef because of the lucrative catering contracts which were given to him by the Kremlin. They made him rich, and yet still he seems to have turned against the president. Now, that said, today it was Jens Stoltenberg, who's Secretary General of NATO, who was battlefield games in Vilnius in Lithuania, which, of course, is another country which has a common border with Russia. He was there with a German foreign minister who said he's going to send another 4,000 troops to Lithuania to bolster its defence. But Mr. Stoltenberg, well, he prefaced his remarks by saying, you know, what happened was an internal affair for Russia. In other words, the West shouldn't dabble at all in what is Russia's business. At the same time, he repeated that Ukraine's offer of joining NATO was absolutely still open. And he said that Ukraine would become a member of NATO. Now, that, of course, is a red rag to the Russian bull. But it's interesting. Mr. Stoltenberg then went on to say that maybe it wasn't wise to provoke a country which still had access to more than 4,000 nuclear warheads. This is what he said.
We condemn Russia's announcement about deploying nuclear weapons. This is reckless and irresponsible. If Russia thinks it can intimidate us from supporting Ukraine, it will fail. We stand with Ukraine for as long as it takes.
Most important conclusion is that the war against Ukraine, launched by Putin, and the monster that Putin created with the Wagner, the monster is biting him now. The monster is acting against his creator. The political system is showing the fragilities, and the military power is cracking.
And Mark, European leaders also talking about standing strong with Ukraine, which is making advances in Bakhmut. What can you tell us about that?
Well, they certainly say that they are making significant progress. What the Ukrainians say they're doing is slowly testing the Russian front line to see if they can detect any weaknesses while continuing their counter-offensive. Now, they say at that point what they would do is bring in the bulk of their force, which of course they say is equipped with modern Western tanks and artillery, which they say would be extremely significant. The idea that Bakhmut is under threat again has a heavy irony. It was, of course, Bakhmut, which was cheered as a triumph for Russia when the Wagner group finally took control of the city. And Mr. Prigozhin himself went to Bakhmut to proclaim that triumph because it was many of his men who fought and who died in that battle. Nonetheless, Kiev isn't suggesting for a second that this is going to be an easy war. They are saying that in the weeks and months ahead, there will be some really tough fighting. The Russians have had a chance to dig in. They've got some very strong positions, and with or without Western armory and artillery, it's going to be, in the end, the grunts who do the legwork. They're going to have to go in there and clear Bakhmut, which is a ruin now, but clear the streets, street by street. That sort of hand-to-hand fighting tends to be very hard, very bloody, and very costly in terms of soldiers' lives.
Mark, thank you very much. Our correspondent Mark Webster in Brussels. Well, emergency counter-terrorism measures enacted in Moscow and the surrounding areas have been cancelled as the Kremlin seeks to restore calm. Let's bring in our correspondent Dasha Chernyshova, who's in the Russian capital. So, Dasha, obviously a very significant weekend. Has there been any word from President Putin today?
Well, indeed, the Kremlin has released the first video of the Russian president since the rebellion of Yevgeny Prigozhin, but this video was largely unrelated to the situation around the Wagner group. The president has been talking about the modernization of Russia's industry, saying that was one of the priorities for Russia. No word has been said with regards to the situation with Yevgeny Prigozhin, but at the same time, there was footage of the Russia's Minister of Defense traveling to the area of the so-called special military operation, and also the Prime Minister of Russia, Mikhail Mishustin, has been talking today. He was largely talking about the unity of the Russian people. He was saying that the cabinet was all working during those tumultuous hours during this weekend. But the main idea from him was that the Russian people have to stay united to preserve Russia's national identity, to choose their own path, and to resist the aggression of the Western countries. A similar message has been made by Russia's Foreign Minister Sergei Lavrov, who was given an interview to the media today, in which he has said that all of the comments with regard to the deal with Yevgeny Prigozhin have already been provided. He said that over the course of the weekend he was in touch with his counterparts and his colleagues who have all supported Russia, and said that they were sure that Moscow would be able to bring the situation under control. Now, another statement of Lavrov has been related to the contacts between Moscow and Washington. On that, we've heard that the U.S. ambassador to Moscow has been in touch with Russia's foreign ministry, saying that the U.S. had nothing to do with what happened, and also insisting that that was Russia's internal affair. Also, we've heard that Lynn Tracy was expressing her hope that Russia's nuclear arsenal would remain okay. So certainly a lot of discussions, but no appearance of the Russian president in live public, so we cannot really verify whether the video we have seen today was recorded after or before the rebellion of Yevgeny Prigozhin.
So, Dasha, those emergency counter-terrorism measures that were brought in over the weekend have been dropped. What's the mood like now in Russia?
Well, when you look at the streets of Moscow, you can see that it's a non-working day, so definitely traffic is lighter, but security measures have, as you have said, been lifted, so life is back to normal. You cannot really say that it has completely changed over the course of the weekend. Yes, indeed, the counter-terrorism operations regime has been introduced. We've seen some of the heavy armor moving in the streets, but certainly the situation is much calmer now. Now, in all the other Russian regions, this life is getting back to normal, but the question, of course, remains when all of the damage that has been done to the roads on the way from Rostov-on-Don towards the Russian capital will be restored. The traffic is normal now, but of course, those minor changes will take some time.
Dasha, thank you very much. Our correspondent Dasha Chernysheva in Moscow. The Russian ruble has plunged to a 15-month low against the US dollar. The currency markets have been hit by uncertainty surrounding the weekend's attempted rebellion against Vladimir Putin. At the same time, gold prices are rising as investors turn to traditional safe haven products. People attending the Summer Davos Forum are arriving in the host city of Tianjin in northern China. This year's forum will start on Tuesday, focusing on how entrepreneurship could boost the world economy. Around 1,500 leaders from more than 90 countries are attending, including a top delegation from Saudi Arabia and the prime ministers of Mongolia, Barbados, Vietnam and New Zealand. So, New Zealand Prime Minister Chris Hipkins is in China for the World Economic Forum. He's on a 5-day official visit to the country and is expected to meet with the Chinese leadership. Both sides are looking to boost trade, expand cooperation on energy and climate change, as well as increase cultural exchanges. Hipkins is the first New Zealand Prime Minister to visit China since 2019. This trip comes as the countries mark the 50th anniversary of diplomatic relations. Hipkins is leading one of the largest delegations the country has ever sent on an overseas mission. In an address at the New Zealand Embassy in China, he expressed his willingness to boost trade between the countries.
New Zealand's open for business, and that we value our relationship with China, with everybody in it, with other businesses in it, and that we see huge potential to continue to grow and strengthen and widen and deepen that relationship. And our presence here today and the fact that we have such a strong delegation here today, I think is a real sign of our commitment and our willingness to put in the work to make all of that happen.
Paul Barber has been speaking to Alistair Crozier, former senior diplomat of New Zealand and executive director of New Zealand-China Council. He explained why Hipkins' visit is important for New Zealand.
Look, I think the primary objective for this visit is really re-engagement. Our last visit by a Prime Minister to China was 2019, but that was a very short one, constrained by domestic events back in New Zealand. So you really need to go back even further to about 2016 to see a visit of this scale and importance. So it's a chance for our Prime Minister to engage with the top Chinese leadership for his first time. And that includes, obviously, the senior leaders who were appointed earlier this year, as well as President Xi. Really a chance for the supporting delegation of senior business leaders to re-engage with the market, to understand how China's changed in the last 3 or 4 years, because as we all know, China never stands still and we need to keep up with that. And also a chance to represent our value proposition of our goods and services again.
And of course, nothing replaces the value of that face-to-face exchange, as you mentioned. And your organisation, the New Zealand-China Council, focuses on promoting cultural exchange and understanding. How do you envision this visit contributing to fostering stronger cultural ties between your two countries?
The reality for New Zealand these days is that around 15% of New Zealanders identify as being of Asian descent, and of those, maybe 5% of Kiwis identify as being ethnically Chinese. So there are these very strong bonds now, including Chinese families that have been with us in New Zealand for generations, and those who are recent arrivals. And I think the more direct connections between us we can have, the better. The other aspect, which is very interesting, is China's enduring interest, genuine interest in the New Zealand Maori culture, and looking at some of the shared values and some of the shared roots going back to the Asian region. So the Prime Minister will be travelling with one of our top Kapahaka groups, that's a Maori performance group, and showcasing that aspect of New Zealand culture. And we always find that really sparks the interest of our Chinese friends.
Mm-hmm. And in an era of rapidly shifting geopolitical dynamics, what are some of the major challenges and opportunities for New Zealand in its relationship with China?
Our foreign minister recently said, however, that for New Zealand, we don't support a new Cold War mentality. We don't feel that we need to make a binary choice between our friends. New Zealand has friends in many places. We're very friendly with Australia and the Pacific region. We have friends in ASEAN. We're friendly with Japan, with South Korea, obviously with China, and with the United States. And I think for New Zealand, the goal is to continue to balance those interests and to pursue what we term an independent foreign policy, which means we make our own policy stances on different issues based on our judgment and our analysis, rather than be influenced by particular other countries. And so New Zealand will continue to do that and to seek to advance this idea of balancing interests across multiple partnerships.
New Zealand is China's largest source of imported dairy products. And alongside traditional sectors like farming, New Zealand is hoping to promote partnerships in emerging industries too. Our correspondent Owen Poland reports.
It's some of the best grazing land in the world, and the organic milk that these cows produce is being exported on daily flights to China.
You know, it can be in China in a matter of days.
Green Valley Dairies is a family-owned business that farms 3,500 cows, and they're processing fresh milk for the Chinese market from their own factory.
And this gives us the ability to track the raw milk directly from the cow through the factory to the end user.
New Zealand's biggest dairy exporter is Fonterra, a cooperative of 9,000 farmers that generates annual revenues of more than $14 billion US. And it's planning to tap into China's emerging well-being market with a new range of nutritional products.
And so there's a lot of opportunity for us, especially as the Chinese consumer becomes more focused on health and wellness, to be able to offer these solutions through our customers to consumers.
New Zealand has around 6 million dairy cows. That's more than one for every human. And around 40% of the milk that they produce gets exported to China in products ranging from infant formula to cheese, even whipped cream. Infant formula is one of the most lucrative categories, but there's also rising demand for adult milk powders.
You've got an elderly population that needs servicing with nutritious product, and you've got a market there that really enjoys buying these products from New Zealand.
And small businesses like Green Valley Dairies hope that Chinese consumers buy into New Zealand's clean green image and the focus on sustainability.
Yeah, I think we're going to see a stronger demand for organic and exactly knowing where your milk has come from, you know, grass-fed, pasture-based, this very thing that we're seeing here.
This week's trade mission to China is also seen as a way to enhance future cooperation.
We want to make sure that the trade lanes remain open, that there is beneficial exchange of ideas, and of course the wonderful products that New Zealand can bring to China.
Owen Poland, CGTN, Auckland.
You're watching CGTN. Still ahead. Kyriakos Mitsotakis' election gamble pays off with a second term and a strong majority. He'll be in Athens, where he's been sworn in as Prime Minister.
Ever wondered what's the difference between a bear and a bull market? Where are the cash cows? And who are the lame ducks? And what exactly are black swans? Grey rhinos? And unicorn companies? Make sense of it all with Global Business, only on CGTN.
There's a new agenda for a new world, accelerating change in almost every part of our lives. It's shifting the norms of how we work, travel, and connect. How we think, interact, and develop. It's a new reality, a new agenda with me, Juliet Mann.
Welcome back. A reminder of our headlines. Russia's defense minister seen for the first time since Saturday's failed mutiny. The whereabouts of Wagner chief Yevgeny Prigozhin, who tried to oust him, remain unknown. And New Zealand's Prime Minister calls for increased trade between the two countries as he begins his 5-day official visit to China. Kyriakos Mitsotakis has been sworn in as Greece's Prime Minister after his New Democracy Party secured a resounding win in Sunday's election. He'd called a second poll to secure an outright majority, and that's what he got, finishing more than 20 points ahead of the main opposition Syriza party. Well, let's talk to our correspondent Evangelo Sipsas in Athens. So, Evangelo, in the end, a commanding win for Kyriakos Mitsotakis. How has he been able to go from an inconclusive election in May to this large majority in just over a month?
Well, I just want to break some news right now. We have a word that the new government of Kyriakos Mitsotakis has been formed. We have a number of same names but different ministries that just came out as we are speaking right now. But going back to your question, it is quite an emphatic win for the Greek Prime Minister Kyriakos Mitsotakis. He did win with a landslide during the first round of elections, but now he also did it in the second round as well. But what has changed? Well, in the first round, of course, he had to follow the new election law, which was changed in 2016 by Alexis Tsipras, which tried to make Greek politics less polarized and have more political parties form a government. But in the second round of elections, the Greek Prime Minister now, Kyriakos Mitsotakis, took that in as an advantage, as when we went into the second round of elections, depending on how well his government or his party would have done, he would have won a number of seats as a bonus, which we saw and made him collect 158 seats, making a majority government. Now you're thinking, how did people come out with these number of, as many were saying, with incidents that took place, especially after the latest shipwreck off the coast of Pylos? Well, we went and we spoke to a political analyst and a journalist who told us that Greeks went and cast their ballot the second time around, having his past record, Kyriakos Mitsotakis' past record in mind.
Mitsotakis has promised changes and new policies. His plan is very precise and describes exactly what he will do and how he will do it. He's increased wages in the public and private sectors. He's created a stronger nation. Now he's pledging to update the healthcare system. We'll have to wait and see.
So, Evangelo, you've told us that Mitsotakis has already formed this new government. What will be its key priorities?
Well, his priorities still remain the same, the ones during his campaign from the first round of elections, which are, of course, to tackle the inflation, bring down the energy prices, increase wages, but also he really focused on the tax policy and rebuilding the country's credit rating, especially after the decade-long financial crisis. He also mentioned that he would like to boost even more the vital industry of tourism in the country, which, as we know, is the backbone of the economy of Greece. So that's what he really focused on, and that's what he wanted to push. Now, of course, we will have to wait and see, as he's still forming a government, who will take responsibility of these ministries, the tourism ministry, but also the health ministry. He also mentioned that the healthcare system is something that he really wants to focus on, as currently in Greece, as he mentioned, is outdated, and he wants to update it, make it something similar to that of other European nations. He also wants to bring back the Greeks who've immigrated to another country seeking a better future. So those are the main points, but until we see him actually making that in action, the Greek parliament will resuming sometime on July the 3rd.
Evangelo, thank you very much. Our correspondent Evangelo Sipsas in Athens. Well, Sunday's election came 11 days after a migrant boat sank off the Greek coast, with hundreds thought to have died. At least 350 Pakistanis were on the boat, according to Pakistan's Interior Minister. Our correspondent Kashif Khan has been meeting relatives of some of those who are missing.
Tragedy struck as the capsized boat claimed the lives of hundreds, many of whom were believed to be from Pakistan. At least 20 victims from Gujranwala city in Punjab province lost their lives in this shipwreck. Umar Malik's brother, Osama, was among those who perished.
The last time we spoke to him was last Thursday. He told me that they would be travelling at 4 a.m. in the morning. He asked me for prayers. However, after that we tried to reach him multiple times, but his number was off. We waited for 2 to 3 days for his call, but on the 4th day we heard about this incident.
The official death toll stands at 82, while 104 survived, including 12 Pakistanis. Muniza Beg, mother of victim named Amjad, issued an appeal.
At this moment, many mothers are in tears. Our sons asked us to sell our houses and give them money for this illegal journey. Is there no system in place? How are these agents able to operate so freely?
According to local officials, over 20 suspected human traffickers have been arrested in Pakistan following the tragic incident.
The agent informed us that all the individuals had safely reached their destination. However, on Thursday, all their contact numbers were unavailable. We made several attempts to reach them, but were unsuccessful.
The economic crisis is driving thousands of young Pakistanis to leave the country, either through legal or illegal means. Even it entails risking their lives in pursuit of a better future. Kashif Khan, CGTN, Pakistan.
Montreal in Canada had the most polluted air quality in the world on Monday. That's according to Swiss group IQ Air's Air Quality Index. The city was covered in smog on Sunday because of smoke from wildfires, which have been burning for weeks. Sports events were cancelled and the local government advised closing all outdoor sports facilities. Chinese golfer Yin Ruoning has won the KPMG Women's PGA Championship in the United States, claiming her first major title. The 20-year-old beat Japanese golfer Yuka Saso on the final hole with a 10-foot birdie putt. The victory makes her the second Chinese woman to win a golf major after Feng Shanshan. And finally, a moment of bonding in the waters of Sydney's Bondi Beach. This curious humpback whale decided to keep a kayaker company by swimming alongside him. The moment was caught on camera by a drone flying overhead. A swimmer could also be seen nearby in the shallow waters. Humpback whales usually migrate from the Antarctic Ocean towards Australia's east coast between June and August. The headlines again. Russia's defence minister seen for the first time since Saturday's failed mutiny. The whereabouts of Wagner chief Yevgeny Prigozhin, who tried to oust him, remain unknown. And Russia's prime minister says the country must unite behind President Putin after what he called a challenge to its stability. And that is the world today. Thanks for watching. We're back with more news at the top of the hour. Coming up next, it's World Insight. For now, from all of the team in London, it's goodbye.